One of the big movies, which is, I mean, maybe the biggest movie which is out today, is The Death of Stalin. I'm delighted to say it's writer and director Armando Iannucci is with us in the studio. Hello, Armando. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. The biggest, so bigger than My Little Pony.
I think, let me just check that with Mark.
Let me just say this. I understood Death of Stalin.
There you go.
Right,
Culturally, you're right in there.
Yeah.
Little Pony.
Okay.
Less so. How are you? And it's been a long time since you've been around. So this project has been...
When did we shot this last summer? We shot this pre-Trump and pre-Brexit and pre all the awfulness, really.
Well, the events are 1953, so is that? Are you thinking that this movie is speaking to our times, Armando?
Well, it was made in the spirit of, my God, this happened, and it's now released in the spirit of, God help us, please don't let this happen again. Really.
Yeah. Well,
which makes it sound quite grim.
It's not.
Yes.
I bumped into Jason Isaacs when either he was shooting or you just finished shooting.
We all do that.
And he said, all the time, because we all hang out together in like a really sort of famous celebrity street.
Yeah.
And he said, I've just been I'm making this movie. And I said, what's it? Describe it for me. And he went, it is tonally hard to describe because it is, on the one hand, really funny, and on the other hand, really horrifying. Just for people who haven't seen it, do you want to just give us the basic?
Well, it's set around the time the events between the time Stalin falls over and has a stroke, his death, and his funeral. And over those 10 days, there is a power struggle going on in the Kremlin as to who takes over. And the power struggle is really between two people, Lavrenti Beria, played magnificently by Simon Russell Beale, who was Stalin's chief torturer, the guy who for 20 years had been drawing up the death lists, the names on the lists of people who were taken off to the gulags and never seen again. Everyone is afraid he's going to succeed, and Steve Buscemi as Nikita Khrushchev thinks he's got to be stopped. And it's about that. But fundamentally, it's about, the comedy from it is the comedy of people being terrified of doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing, of putting everything had to be done unanimously in Stalin's Russia. There is the famous story of when he gave a speech, everyone stands up and applauds, but the first person to stop clapping gets shot. So the applause would go on for just hours. Technically it could go on forever under that law.
So it's a little kind of whisper of what we're getting from North Korea is exactly the kind of material that you're filming with. The origin is in a graphic novel.
Yeah, by Fabien Nuret, a French graphic novel called The Death of Stalin. And I was approached by Quad, a French production company who owned the film rights, who said to me, we want to make this into a movie. We'd like you to do it. I said, well, I read it and I said, absolutely. I'd been thinking about doing something about dictatorship anyway. I was thinking more of a fictional, maybe contemporary dictatorship. But there it all was, laid out in black and white historical events with this level of absurdity to it as well. I said, this is the story I want. But I said, I'm doing Veep. I'm not ready to do it now. And they said, we'll wait.
Wow.
And I knew I was about to do my last season of Veep. So I said, okay, I'll see you in 18 months. And that was it.
It's not the most obvious subject for a comedy.
No. And, the challenge, I think, it was two things really. Challenge was to make it funny, but at the same time for the comedy not to undermine the seriousness of what was going on, because I knew going into it there were going to be scenes that were funny and there were going to be scenes that definitely weren't funny, and it was up to me to make sure that those scenes were as memorable as the comic set pieces. But for me, the comedy was the way into it. I mean, the nerve. I mean, it opens with a true story. Paddy Considine playing the.
He's fantastic.
Playing the head of Radio Moscow. Concert going on live. Mozart being broadcast. They get a phone call. This is Stalin enjoying the concert. I'd love a recording. I'll send someone around to pick it up. Paddy Considine puts the phone down, turns to the sound engineer and says, are we recording this? And they say, no, it's going out live. And he just panics because he doesn't want to be shot. He orders the doors to be closed, everyone to stay where they are, rounds the audience back in off the streets, at which point the conductor faints out of sheer terror, knocks herself unconscious, and they have to scour the streets of Moscow for another conductor who comes in and does it in his pajamas. And that's all true. Well, except in reality, the first conductor they got in was drunk, so they had to get actually a third conductor in. But I took that out because it was too silly.
That's right. When the real thing is too absurd, you had to rein it back in.
Yeah. We airbrushed one of the conductors out of history.
Can you just do a word on the casting, Amanda? Because I mean, uniformly brilliant performances. So however you came to the decisions, everyone is spot on. Just explain what you would, this ensemble cast, how you assembled them, and how did you choose, and how did you come to these decisions?
I started Lavrenti Beria. I wanted Simon Russell Beale for, and you know, Simon's a fantastic stage actor. Doesn't do very much film and TV. Usually does cameos. I liked the fact that, you know, the audiences wouldn't really know him as a film actor, in the same way that we don't really know who Lavrenti Beria is. And I wanted the heart of this film to be something unknown but kind of mesmerising. Once you've got him, you think, okay, who's the exact opposite? So Steve Buscemi, Simon Russell Beale. You couldn't get two more unlike people together. I knew I didn't want people to do fake Russian accents. I wanted to just do their own, because the Soviet Union was a massive empire with different, you know, Stalin spoke Georgian, you know, all these accents and dialects flying around. So I thought, we're going to do it in English, but I want a mix of voices. And then, you know, once you've got those two, you then start working out, okay, who's the good number three, the guy in the middle who becomes number one briefly but can't handle it. Oh, well, Jeffrey Tambor, he's funny. And I can see him exactly do that role. I mean, he was famous ages ago for doing Hank on Larry Sanders' show, the chat show host's sidekick, who daren't be put in the presenter's chair.
There's a brilliant bit of casting with Michael Palin.
And Michael Palin and Molotov.
Yes, and it's superb, not only because he plays it really well, but it also reminded me to a certain extent of some of the dilemma of his character in Brazil, and that kind of absurdity of the character in Brazil, in which you know, an official calls his wife by the wrong name, and then he insists on referring to his wife by the wrong name because it's in order to not annoy the official above him.
Yeah, I'm so glad to see him back on screen, actually, Michael. He's a fantastic actor. And he plays Molotov, who is so wedded to the party line at all times that when the party line changes every half hour, he has to change what he sincerely believes in practically every half hour. And that's such a kind of, you know, Michael does that brilliantly. And then Paul Whitehouse, who I've always really regarded as a great actor, but has always done his own stuff. So I just asked him to be in the film because I want to see him in a movie.
And our very own Jason Isaacs.
Yes. Who kind of has his own entrance halfway through the film.
He does, and he plays Zhukov,
Zhukov, head of the Soviet army, great war hero. So who felt he could just tell Stalin what to do. The only one, really. And
Jason plays Zhukov with a Yorkshire accent.
Yes.
Which he's described himself as sounding a little bit Brian Glover in Kes.
Yes, a little bit. A smattering of Sean Bean as well.
It is a fantastic entrance, because when he comes in, because everybody is terrified of saying the wrong thing, except for him. Yes. He just genuinely doesn't care.
Let's play a clip just to illustrate some of the points that we're making here. Certainly the accents point rather nicely. So we've got Steve Buscemi as Nikita Khrushchev, and Jason as, is it Georgy Zhukov or Georgy Zhukov?
We had long debates about that, and I left it up to them to decide.
Zhukov.
We've replaced all the swearing, and there's lots of it with bird song, so there's as much bird song as there is acting.
I was the one who put the trains back on.
I know. Comrade, I'll punch you into a sticky pulp.
Thank you.
You thinking?
Oh, I don't know, okay? But I did it. And I really need your help.
To do what? The body's piling up in the street. It's a bit late, isn't it?
What if we blame this on someone who's out of control?
Nicky, be very careful what you say next. Who?
Beria.
I'm going to have to report this conversation. Threatening to do harm or obstruct any member of the Presidium in the process of looking at your face. Nikita Khrushchev, you balls like Kremlin domes, right?
Stop. Be serious. Are you in?
I'm in. Thinks he can take on the Red Army? Germany, I think I can take a flesh-lumping waistcoat. No, it's got to be tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Sorry, you busy washing your hair or what?
I'm going to have to go and see this film again.
Okay, it sounds a bit like Tweet of the Day there.
It absolutely.
That's what it sounds like whenever he and I start discussing politics.
Yeah, and if we're recording
we're not allowed to.
When Mark goes off on one, he's replaced by Birdsong, which is actually proved quite popular. Yeah. I wonder if, Mark's already touched on this, but if you watch the trailer,
yes,
I wonder if people will get a slightly misleading impression that it's sort of farce and slapstick and great gags all the way through. But as Mark was suggesting, there is a dark heart to this film,
yes,
which is, and it involves massacres, and it involves paedophilia, and it involves torture. And I guess if you hadn't put those in, you'd be accused of whitewashing a terrible.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes some trailer of all that was in. But I mean, I've been very honest in conversations and interviews that it is two things. It is a comedy and it is a tragedy, and they run simultaneously. The first thing I said to the production team, really, right at the start of the process was, the comedy takes place in the Kremlin, but we have to be very respectful of the fact that millions of people were affected, and we can't hide that, and we mustn't run away from it, and we need to be honest about it. We mustn't let it overwhelm the film, but I want the audience to feel by the end that kind of underlying tension and anxiety that I think most people must have felt on a daily basis, having put up with 20 years of not knowing whether they were going to live through the night. So there is that air of it, and I'm being, if it's not clear, I'm making it very clear now. I mean, it is. I still think it's a very funny film, and I wanted to make a very funny film, and we got some great comic performers in it. But from the word go, also, I think is that, we don't let it get out of sight. There is this underlying reality of what's going on, really.
There is that. There's a lovely line which Michael Palin, I think it says, "I'm sorry, I can't remember who's alive." And I compared it before with that thing with Brazil, which again has that sense of comedy and terror at the same time.
Yeah.
That there is this absolutely terrifying sense that at any time somebody could put a foot out of line, and that will be. But it is that kind of heightens the absurdity. But I started, like all film critics, when you're sitting in films, in movies, you write down lines that particularly, what plane crash? Soviet planes don't crash, and I found about 10 minutes in, I just gave up because it was like literally there was quotable line after quotable line. Stalin didn't like factionalism. He was liberal. He was radical and popular. It is a beautifully written script.
Oh, well, thank you very much. We put a lot of work into it. I mean, a lot of people talk about the improvisation and so on. In the end, the hard work goes in the preparation of nailing the story and then nailing the dialogue. And also the casting. You talked earlier about the casting seeming to fit. I mean, what we do is we get the cast in early and we work with each performer and each actor, talk about their character. They go away and research it. So that informs the script, so that the lines that they're given, I can't imagine giving to anyone else playing that part by the time we're on set, because we've worked through. And then we get all the cast together for 2 weeks in a rehearsal room away from the studio, and just a church hall, £50 a day and tea and biscuits, and
the glamour.
And well, yeah, but why have all these conversations on set for an hour and a half when 150 people are being paid to kind of?
Although shockingly, apparently many movies are made exactly like that, in which you don't have rehearsal time before you get to the cameras, which seems astonishing.
That just astounds me. And so on day one, somebody starts with a strange voice or a strange kind of walk that there's no time to kind of do anything about because this wasn't brought up. But it allows us all to work, and on the big set piece, the big comic set pieces with, and it's great seeing Paul Whitehurst and Steve Buscemi in a room with Michael Palin carrying a body around for half a day to see where the funny comes, and it's that sort of thing.
And there is so much comedy, and it is absolutely laugh out loud funny, and then you're laughing, and then you suddenly feel extremely bad because of all the other material that you're writing about. But you have written about power and incompetence a lot, over the decades. And what a lot of the films, if there's a movie about Stalin or Hitler, or they're looking at the subject of dictatorship, is you get all the bad stuff. You don't get the incompetence. And there are points in this movie where you think everyone's an idiot. Everyone I'm looking at is truly useless.
Yeah, I'd actually say it's competence. It's a machine that just eats people up on a regular basis. They had a quota system for the lists when they started, so they had to get through all of Stalin's known enemies. That took them the first week. But by the second week, they were just asking people if there was anyone they didn't like to put on the list. It's a machine getting out of control. And that's what I want. And actually, Russian literature's full of this model of the little guy, the little person, chewed up by the big bureaucracy. And my favourite scene is there's a scene right in the middle, which is a very long committee meeting. Mm-hmm. Very static scene.
Hands not quite going up.
Yeah, exactly. Because every decision has to be made unanimously. It's just no one knows what the decision should be. So there's a lot of
and again, it's
looking around.
It's back to Palin because there's a long sequence in that scene in which Michael Palin is doing Stalin would have wanted this, but then this also would have been. Yeah. And people's hands are up, down, and it's a great big sort of extended sequence. It goes on for like 2 or 3 minutes.
Yes.
It's really funny because no one's quite sure what the punchline is going to be.
I think it's the longest scene in the movie, and it just the way it's been I noticed once we cut it down it was exactly halfway in the film, and it sort of summed up that kind of what do we do, and can someone tell me what to do because I'm scared.
Will you get a Russian release?
We've got a Russian distributor, and the Russian press have said they liked it. They thanked us for not using Russian accents. I know someone in the Communist Party there has said that it's a Western conspiracy to undermine Russia.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Which, I mean, I admit I took some money from the CIA.
Of course.
They gave me some notes. It was lovely. Bit of comedy they put in. No, I mean, so, but Stalin he's in an ambiguous position in the Soviet Union, in Russia now, because, if you ask, especially young people, what are you taught about Stalin? They say, some people say he killed millions, other people say he industrialized the Soviet Union and won the war. You decide. And that's the sort of...
he did both.
Well, yeah, and there's that ambiguity there, but also there is the idea that Putin is projecting of the strong leader. So there's statues of Stalin. There's also statues of Tsar Nicholas II up in Moscow. It doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum they are.
And in the American culture, which you've been steeped in for the last few years, who would have thought Russia has suddenly become a real hot potato? How will views of Russia and what Russia's been doing apparently in the American election play with this extraordinary story that you're bringing in?
Well, it's made Russia relevant, I suppose. If you want to be cynical about it, I suppose the rise of a new form of dictatorship in Russia has been good for us, has been good for the film, in that it's sort of made it strangely relevant in a way that I wasn't expecting. There's lots of stuff in the movie about false narratives and old narratives and new narratives, and people, when I was playing it to early screenings, people were saying, but that's all fake news and alternative facts, isn't it? And it just kind of tells you that these things don't go away. You think democracy is perfect, and once you have it, it's permanent. But actually, it needs to be refreshed and renewed and recommitted to all the time. And if you don't, if you abstain, if you don't vote, if you don't participate, it falls apart, and you get these quasi-populist movements that are really about the one person, the strong man. Donald Trump in his acceptance speech at the Republican convention said, "I am the one man to solve this country's problem." The one man. And that's a dangerous situation to be when you are the only person who has the truth, and everyone else, all your opponents are, well, Stalin called them enemies of the people. Trump calls them fake news and unpatriotic. But that's a kind of worrying pattern of behaviour to see on such a big stage.
Yeah. Some listener correspondence to you, Armando. Chris in Beijing.
Oh, wow.
Who's obviously a fan
We're global.
Oh, I know.
We're global.
Oh, yes.
Fan of the thick of it. He wants to know who came up with this line from the show.
God, Kermode, your hands are massive.
That's Chris Addison. And it's haunted Mark ever since.
I know,
big
I'm sorry
flappy
about
hands.
Oh, no, I'm happy
Sorry
with
about
that.
And Nathan in Brighton points out that in the same episode, we get this.
I'm actually really nervous about tonight.
Why?
Well, last time I was on 5 Live, I thought it was Simon Mayo. It was going to be a walkover, and it was a nightmare.
But you just got unlucky there. I mean, I suppose there has to be one person that Simon Mayo doesn't get on with.
That's Rebecca Front. So you're obviously just in a 5 Live frame of mind when you're doing that one.
I'll get my coat. I think the first one, I think it was Tony Roach who came up with the flappy hands.
Well,
line.
please, thank you. Particularly now in a world in which having small hands is something which is
Exactly.
On one hand,
you can flap your hands
just
with pride.
delighted. Yes.
Yeah.
And you being the nicest man in showbiz, there has to be somebody that you dislike. I think that's a very warm compliment.
Yeah.
Steven Seagal is the answer.
Yes, that is true. Yes,
is
blimey.
that. Amanda, as the director and the writer of a big movie, I want to are you nervous? I mean, you've got such an extraordinary track record. The advanced press is amazing. Some people have called it the film of the year. All the reviews are great. I thought it was fantastic. Mark thinks it's fantastic. Are you do you get nervous? What are you thinking on the day of release?
Day of release. I mean, it's so different from like doing a TV show where you know what it is you're making. You know how many episodes, how long they're to be, and when they're going out, and that's it. With a film, there's so much uncertainty from start to finish. Is it going to get made? Are you going to get the financing? Who's in it? When's it? There is a kind of nervousness about the opening weekend in a way that you don't have with television, because you're aware, some other people have given you a lot of their money to make something that you're then asking a lot of people to pay money to go and see, and you sort of want that to be a happy experience for everyone. So you know, and I remember when In the Loop came out, just actually worrying about the weather, checking the weather reports.
Yeah, which has a big effect, effect on box office.
Not that there's anything you can do about it.
I remember Danny Boyle famously saying that his brilliant and very underrated science fiction movie Sunshine,
great film,
killed stone dead by the sunshine.
Yeah,
it was the sunniest weekend that we'd seen in ages.
Fantastic film. Yeah. So there is that nervousness. So I'll actually be happy come Monday if we've had a good weekend.
Well, it's miserly out there now, so you're doing fine, you know.
Tom Hanks was on the BBC yesterday and today, Armando. He's got a book out, but he was being asked about Harvey Weinstein.
Yes.
And he said it will be a watershed. He was very clear. I hope
so, yeah.
He said this is a watershed moment. And what is it, Mark? He said that Weinstein will be a noun and a verb.
A noun and a verb, something will come to define a before and after. I mean, he was very, very, very clear about it.
And what's your take?
Well, my take also is that actually, you know, fine that Harvey Weinstein, this is happening to him, but, you know, the fact that he could threaten actresses with the end of their careers kind of implies that he had the means to do it, which kind of implies there are other people involved in this or who let it happen. So I think, I mean, I don't know, but I'm assuming there's much more to come out because it can't just be him. If there must have been a culture of that form of threat and abuse and a culture of silence and maintaining silence within Hollywood.
After the death of Stalin, are you tempted to go back slightly smaller, go back to television? Are there scripts?
No, I want to do next year. I want to make a film of David Copperfield,
The Magician.
They're not The Magician. No,
nicely played. Well done.
That would be a different movie.
I just tee him up and you just knock the... Yeah, it would be an interesting film, actually, wouldn't it? No CGI. I'm a huge Dickens fan, and I want to make a film version of David Copperfield, which is a long and quite a kind of weird book in a way. And I kind of want to start from the premise, assume that no adaptations of Dickens have been done before. So try not to... no cobbled streets and dames and oi governor kind of street urchins and start afresh. You know,
is that even possible?
Well, we'll find out.
So, and any TV luring you back?
Well, yeah, I'm doing another pilot for HBO. They said, you know, the next thing you do, you can do in the UK. And I said, well, actually, I want to do something in space. I'm a bit of a sci-fi nut, so I want to doing a comedy set in 40 years' time in the era of space tourism.
Wow, it sounds that you'll be rather busy for the next few years. Armando, thank you very much, Steve, for coming in. And please come in and talk about David Copperfield.
Oh, yeah.
Once that's done and sorted.
In a street urchin accent.
Exactly, exactly right.